Thank you for joining us today. My name is Lynn Holland, and I'm the administrator at the Spark Center for Social Research Innovation. Welcome to today's Spark Talk. Give up your mic, exploring capacity building in CBPR partnerships with Joy Kaufman and Keisha Ape. I'd like us to begin by giving thanks and honor to the Haudenosaunee and the Abenishnabe nations as the traditional inhabitants of the lands where McMaster University stands, to state that it is acknowledged a debt to those who were here before us, and to recognize our responsibility as guests to respect and honor the intimate relationship Indigenous people have to this land. Joy Kaufman is a PhD, a professor of psychiatry at Yale School of Medicine, is a clinical and community psychologist who conducts large-scale, multi-level evaluations of health service systems and provides consultation to governmental and community organizations. Her work includes the training of community members to evaluate the services they receive so that they can provide feedback to improve services provided in their community. Keisha April, PhD, is an assistant professor at the Rector's School of Criminal Justice. She is a lawyer and a clinical community psychologist whose work examines health disparities amongst racial ethnic minority youth, with a focus on youth at risk for our experiencing social justice system contact. She leverages multiple methods, including mixed methods and community-based research, to investigate ways to promote healthier outcomes for young people. Thank you very much for joining us today. I'll pass it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Lynn. So I'm going to get us started. I'm going to start by giving a little bit of a background of CBPR and then give some detail about the study that we conducted, a little background, and turn it over to Keisha, who will give results of the study that she led. Next slide, Keisha. So traditional health research does not often reflect the voices of individuals and community that is intended to impact, resulting in research that has limited utility and some would say limited validity. Unfortunately, this is most often the case when research is intended to impact marginalized populations, including groups that are excluded based on race or ethnicity, gender identity, physical abilities, language, or age. However, we're beginning to see an enhanced focus on involving recipients of care and research about the services they receive. Next slide. Community-based participatory research has its origin in action research, where the experimental approach is combined with social action and is intended to address social problems. Kurt Lewin is credited with starting the move toward action research. In CBPR, researchers work in partnership with community members and strive to develop equitable partnership with the individuals who are potentially impacted by the results of the research. Community members share their expertise and experience, resulting in studies that are more credible, and useful. In addition, community members often receive training to expand their skills so that they can authentically participate in the research. When researchers partner with community members, the research is more culturally relevant and the findings are more valid than traditional. While CBPR holds great promise, its success rests on the relationship between researchers and community members and a shared vision for the questions that will be asked and how results will be used. Next slide. Today, we're going to share the results of a study that examined the process by which a community organization was able to sustain work that began as a collaboration with an academic researcher. I'm going to share a bit about the organization and how this work unfolded, and then Dr. April will share the results of a study, which asked participants, both the researcher and community partners, how the project unfolded and what they saw as the facilitators that enabled the community partners to move from a collaborative effort to one where they continue to engage in the work independent of the researcher. In this project, I worked with a family organization in Connecticut called Favor. Favor is a statewide multicultural family organization that provides advocacy, education, and support to families that have children have a child who has behavioral health needs or developmental disabilities. As a team, they work to build the capacity of caregivers and youth to advocate for their family and provide training so that these individuals can also advocate for changes at the systems level. Favor employs family systems managers or FSMS individuals who have lived experience with the child serving systems. Their role is to promote the family voice at decision-making tables through sharing what they have learned from the community and in supporting family members to join decision-making tables with the goal of creating a system that is responsive to the needs and desires of families. Next slide. This work began in 2012 when the state of Connecticut was awarded a planning grant from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, or SAMHSA, to design a plan to enhance the state's children's behavioral health system of care. 2 months after we received the planning grant, the tragedy at the Sandy Hook Elementary School occurred and 20 first graders and 6 educators were murdered. This event propelled the state to look very carefully at the children's behavioral health system of care. The legislature passed a bill requiring the Department of Children and Families, or DCF, to write a new behavioral health plan that would provide supports to all Connecticut children and their families. DCF wanted the plan to be guided by the voices and desires of youth and their caregivers who have access services provided in the behavioral health system. I was the evaluator of the planning grant and the subsequent implementation grants, and DCF asked me to support the Favor team as they sought to gather input from youth and families across the state. In that first year, Favor held 22 community conversations and spoke to 297 caregivers and 86 youth. The results of these community conversations served as a blueprint for the behavioral health plan that was developed, approved, and implemented by the state. Now I'll share the process of how we engaged in this work. Because we had 4 years to engage in the work, I saw it as an opportunity to help Favor staff to build the skills to continue to do this work independently. I had worked with the Favor staff over the years and knew that they were a dedicated group of individuals who have incredible skills and who are eager to enhance or learn any skills that can assist them in their work. My first step was to develop the questions that the FSMs would ask during the community conversations. Together with the FSMs and Favor's executive director, we decided to ask 3 overarching questions. What works in the system of care? What aspects of the system of care need enhancement? And what recommendations do you have so that we can build a system of care that is responsive to the needs and desires of the families receiving care? Prior to their beginning the community conversations, we spent time building the FSM skills to facilitate the conversation. Each of them had extensive experience facilitating support groups, so our focus was on how to lead the conversation without including their personal stories. This was done so that the conversation was organic and would reflect the perceptions of the participants. We also worked on how to record the information shared in the conversations through structured note-taking. After each conversation ended, the Favor team shared the notes with our Yale team. And that first year, our team at Yale reviewed the notes, developed a coding scheme, and coded the data. Then we brought printouts of the data sorted by code to an all-day meeting that included the Favor team and the lead administrator from DCF, few members of my team and myself, and we spent the day analyzing the data to identify the themes that emerged. Finally, I developed a summary of the data, which I shared with the Favor team to be sure it reflected what they had seen in the data. The meeting when we reviewed the data summary was one of those experiences in my professional life that stands out. They were excited to see how all the information they collected resulted in a summary that clearly identified the strengths, areas for growth, and family member recommendations for the children's behavioral system of care. At that point, I knew they saw the value in this work and could, with training, sustain it. After the first year, the state asked Favor to conduct an annual series of community conversations. Over the next 3 years, my team and I trained the FSMs to do various aspects of the work. In year 2, the team learned how to code data. We worked together to develop a coding scheme, coded some transcripts together, and then each FSM took a few transcripts to code. A member of my team also coded each transcript, and then the 2 individuals who coded met to reconcile their codes. As you all know, qualitative coding is not a skill that fits for everyone, and it became very clear which Favor staff were the best fit for coding. Again, in year 2, we analyzed the data together, and I wrote up the summary. In year 3, after they completed the conversation, the Favor team developed the coding scheme, and then 2 members of the Favor team coded each transcript and met for reconciliation. And that year, my team still managed the data for them, and the supervisor of the FSMs and I worked together to develop the data summary by first reviewing the things together and then thinking about how to tell a story with the data Then she drafted the summary and we reviewed it and edited it together. In the fourth year, we taught the favor staff how to manage the data using an Excel spreadsheet we created that allows the coded data to be sorted for analysis. The favor team completed each aspect of the coding, analysis, and writing the summary independently. The results in year 4 were of the same caliber of the results and summary from year 1. The favor team has continued to engage in this work for more than 10 years. Every year or two, we check in and I help them to train new team members to code, but otherwise they complete the work without assistance. Next slide. So why do I think this process enabled them to sustain the work? First, I had an existing relationship with the favor team. We had worked together over the years on several projects, and there was and is a high level of mutual respect. A relationship enabled them to ask me questions. They guided my pace and training and allowed all of us to be vulnerable in the process. Second, the favor staff are intelligent, highly skilled, and unbelievably dedicated to their work. They saw the benefit of this work during the first year as it gave them the power of bringing the collective voice of families to the state. And as noted earlier, the statewide Children's Behavioral Health Plan in 2013 was developed using the data Favor had collected as a blueprint, and subsequent changes to the plan were made based on feedback data collected from families over the next few years. Finally, time was on our side. We had 4 years, which enabled us to engage in an iterative process of their developing the skills to take on the work. By following their lead regarding the pace of the training, we were able to work together as they gained confidence and competence and took ownership of each phase of the work. And now I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Abel, who will share the study she led to understand how this process unfolded from the perspective of the favor team.
Thanks, Dr. Kaufman. We wanted to juxtapose Dr. Kaufman's perspective with the experience of the community partners to better understand what were the key elements that supported the successful transition of ownership and power from the community members' perspectives as well. To this end, we had 4 goals in mind. First, we wanted to describe the training and the procedures used to build capacity within the organization. So specifically, what steps were taken by the research partners and what skills were developed. We also wanted to describe how capacity building was experienced by those involved. So how did Favor and the research team members perceive the process, skill development, and the impact of assuming ownership? We also wanted to describe the evolution of the initiative once ownership was achieved. So how did Favor make it their own, and what accomplishments and challenges were experienced once independent? And then we also wanted to be able to provide recommendations for future community-based research partnerships. So what can others learn from Favor's experiences, and how can these lessons be used to support future sustainable partnerships? So to investigate this, we chose to conduct individual qualitative interviews with Favor staff. We spoke to 5 individuals with different roles within the organization: family system managers, the director of family programming, and the executive director. The individuals we spoke to were a majority women and all identified as Black or African American. As Dr. Kaufman described, Favor employs individuals who are from the communities that they work within, and they share lived experiences with the families that they advocate for. In our interviews, we asked 11 questions that focus on how they were trained to facilitate the conversations and engage in qualitative research, how Favor developed independence in the data gathering and reporting process, and what other organizations should know or think about if planning to undertake a similar process. In terms of our analytical approach, we chose to use thematic analysis to identify shared perspectives across these first-person reflections. We also engaged in an iterative process in which we co-developed meaning of the findings with the Favor members that we interviewed to make sure that there was consensus about the meaning-making of their reflections. And in addition, our belief in the co-ownership of this process is also reflected in the fact that the Favor staff who helped us create this work are all named as co-authors on this paper. For the remainder of this talk, we are going to walk you through our findings and that fell into 4 broad categories, focusing on the training and implementation of the conversations, how the group developed independence and ownership, what drove sustainability, and reflections on lessons learned. For our first broad category, Training and implementation, this focused on staff members' reflections on their experiences being trained to conduct the focus groups and to collect, code, and interpret qualitative data for many for the first time. Four themes emerge in this category. Feeling that the research project was developed collaboratively, that the training by the academic partner to conduct the research was supported, relatable, and strengths-based, and that learning new professional and personal skills was rewarding. This category also included staff's perceptions of the challenges of engaging in qualitative research. In the area of collaborative development, FSMs discussed how each aspect of the project was developed with their input in mind. For example, they described that they appreciated that data gathering questions were created through a collaborative process between FSMs and the evaluation team, in which all partners had a voice in deciding which questions they would ultimately include. One FSM remarked, "We worked in partnership. Everyone had an opportunity to weigh in on the best way to conduct this, to develop this process. Who should be the audience, where we should go, how broad that should be." And it wasn't traditional thinking. It was a shared and collective input in that process. So this goes to show that the FSMs conceptualize these collaborative experiences as being critical in their success in the project. Staff also described how they were somewhat hesitant or intimidated by developing the new skills that would be required in this project, namely facilitation, data collection, analysis, and report writing. But that the way that the training was provided helped to alleviate some of these concerns. They described the relatable and approachable nature as being responsible for increasing their comfort and confidence in engaging in the research process. One FSM stated, "Dr. Kaufman's been a part of us for a very long time, and she would guide us to think outside of the box, to say, okay, what is it that we want to draw out from the conversations with these families?" Their relationship and comfort with the academic partner increased their comfort, but they also felt encouraged by the way that she made learning these new skills approachable. Another key aspect was the intrinsic value that the FSMs found in what they were learning. The FSMs found the training that they received to be rewarding, as it built new professional skills and allowed them to support the families that they work with in new ways. One FSM remarked, "I love how during the coding process, different categories emerged. It was very interesting seeing how you could take people's words and create the summarization that is so broad. We're talking about the entire state of Connecticut, not talking about just according to zip code zones." This illustrates the excitement and interest that the FSMs had for this new method of learning about the impact of their work and how it affected the community. And then briefly, in terms of challenges that they identified in the early stages, FSOs reported that this included finding some of the conversations difficult to hear because of having to hear how families have been struggling to get their needs met. They also indicated the strain of how the process added additional job responsibilities that they didn't have before. And they expressed their early frustration related to the slowness of the data collection and reporting process. They wanted to be able to get this information back to the families quickly, but also realized through this process that it takes time to do the work accurately. In our second category, independence and ownership, this describes staff members' reflection of the experience and process of becoming independent and developing a sense of ownership of the initiative. So four themes also emerged in this area. Acknowledgement that forward thinking and planning had set them up to be able to take on this role successfully. A sense of appropriateness or suitability for the role. Feeling confident in their abilities. And their excitement about the ability to adapt or expand the project to further the organization's mission. So when thinking about the role of planning, staff reflected that they felt that the partnership provided a foundation of support and guidance, such that they were well prepared to take on the role that the partnership had planned for. One member stated, "Developing our independent with the forward thinking of those folks involved. We developed a real, true, and trusting partnership so that our involvement, input, and response to this work and our roles are so respected that we were given this opportunity." This reflection illustrates that the FSMs were conscious of the respect that the partners had for them and the faith that they had in their abilities. These qualities of the partnership were internalized by many of the members of the group. So, ownership and independence of such a new role can be intimidating, but the FSMs felt confident in favor of taking ownership of the initiative because they internalized the goal of the project and believed that it made the most sense for their organization to lead this process. This is especially so because of the organization's pre existing relationship with and commitment to Connecticut's families. One member stated, being a family led agency, I think ownership is a big benefit because we've been doing it from the beginning. We're working in areas where people are familiar with us, and it's good to have consistency. And if we're going to be having the conversations, facilitating them, documenting them, we should see it all the way to the end. This illustrates the buy in that the group had in the mission of the project, their ability to see it as beneficial, and their sense of responsibility to the individuals that they were collecting the information from. Staff also described that ownership of the initiative had multiple benefits for the FSMs, including increased confidence and belief in the utility of using a data collection process to improve family circumstances. One FSM stated, we can be held accountable. We are community people, and we understand the essence of the process. We don't want to see families' words just taken for granted or used loosely. In a sense, we get to monitor that process. This illustrates staff members' identification with the role and confidence in being responsible for making sure that families' voices were heard and communicated effectively. And lastly, in this area, FSMs identified that ownership was important because it allowed favor to make the process their own, improve it, and adapt it for other community purposes. Integral to the organization's mission is to be able to empower families, advocate for them, and include them at decision-making tables. FSMs described how the knowledge and skills learned throughout this process could be passed on to families to increase the community's capacities. One FSM noted, through this process, we build our capacity, and then we figure out a way to pass that skill set on to the community. It's reach one, teach one. And we do it by supporting individuals, by mentoring folks, and that gives us a pool that can impact the workforce. So for our next broad category, this describes the group's thoughts about what drove the sustainability of this initiative and why it is something that they will continue to prioritize. Three themes emerged in this area. Recognition that community members valued being given a voice and seeing the impact of their feedback reflected in changes in the system. That the system valued hearing the feedback and were motivated to incorporate this to improve the system of care. And that there was increased staff interest in developing additional means of sustainability, including involving families in the process to more directly provide feedback to the system. So for the first theme, FSMs noted that families had often felt overlooked and that their experiences were not being included in how the system of care was being developed or in the ways that their families were being impacted. So FSMs could start to see and hear when the conversation started. Families were excited about having a platform to share their experiences. And further, that these thoughts were being solicited showed that there was an interest by the system in hearing from them. Families also expressed to the FSMs that they could see changes in the system following the conversation, telling families that their input was meaningful. One member stated, as we go through the questions, families really enjoy it, and many ask, can we do this more often now? Can you come back and we do this once a month? Another stated, people want to feel connected. That's just a natural rhythm. People like to be asked, and the families were trusting the process, and they're trusting to see more and to be a part of more. These reflections were the FSM's tangible evidence that this outlet was meaningful to families and gave them an opportunity to be involved that they had been yearning for. The systems involved also expressed genuine and sustained interest in the feedback received from the conversations, and families suggested methods to improve the system of care. These were taken and applied in ways that worked to improve the system of care, and this also worked to increase trust and involvement on the part of the families as well. One member stated, these systems require us to have 51% parent and community participation. That was always a fleeting number that we could not meet. But through having this partnership, we were able to meet, sustain, and even surpass the goal of 51% participation. And I see some of that now spilling over to even newer initiatives. This initiative helped the system function more effectively, and the benefits of that led to increased ability to meet families' needs. And lastly, the staff reflected that they were intrinsically motivated and excited to continue this initiative because of this potential to create bridges and opportunities for families. Having these skills allowed staff to think about creative and novel ways to increase families' participation and involvement and increase the system's ability to view families as valuable contributors and collaborators. Staff were excited about seeing families at these decision making tables and saw this initiative as a mechanism to help achieve that. One FSM noted family members should join the local level collaboratives as expert consultants. That's how families should be seen and engaged. Let's drop the mic, give it to the youth. Let's hear what they have to say about what this should look like and what we should do. And in our last category, this involved understanding what each team member thought were the lessons that they have learned through this process of developing ownership of a community-based research initiative. They were asked to think about whether they would provide any advice to others hoping to conduct a similar process given their experiences. Across reflections, three themes emerged. Stressing that it is critical to enter a partnership with intentionality, the need to commit to the accountability that comes along with this role, and to manage the expectations of community members and partners throughout the process. The first theme and lessons learned illustrates FSM's belief that collaborative development of a community data collection initiative is critical, and all collaborators, including service providers, must be committed to valuing community voice. This theme reflected FSM's recognition of the challenges that may arise if there's disconnect or disagreement among partners about the partnership's goals, roles, and commitment. But also that when these commitments are made in advance, it contributes to an extremely rewarding process. One FSM noted, when the process is developed in collaboration and in concert with other organizations and systems, the work becomes easier and you're not doing it alone. That practice spills over to those people who you are serving, and then they become engaged to become fully employed in this process. FSMs also reflected about the need to have accountability and humility in the role. In other words, if one seeks to do this work, the focus must be on the individuals being impacted, and that partners should not go in pushing their own agenda. The goal must be about uplifting the family's voices and not the organization or partnership's interests. They described that without this, there may be a disconnect, lack of trust, and lack of involvement in the initiative. In describing her experiences learning this lesson, one FSM stated, I would say don't go into a group with an idea that I have a set agenda. Like I have a set of questions and I need each one of these questions answered. And it's like an interview. I don't think that people take too well to that style. They don't want to feel like you're talking at them and you're just a checkoff. They want to hear that you're part of the conversation and that you actually hear them. Another FSM stated, make sure that you don't shut anybody down. If somebody is saying something, no matter how long it takes, they'll eventually get there. You have to be able to have them say what they really need to say. These reflections illustrate how the FSMs developed appreciation of giving up their control, dropping the mic, and giving a platform for others' voices. They express the importance of not driving or pushing what's being said and organically allowing the family members to participate in the ways most effective for them. Lastly, FSMs reflected that they were aware of their role of being a broker between the families and the system, and that a lot of responsibility came along with that role. They learned that the process can be slow, arduous, and drawn out, and that managing families' expectations is important to be able to gain and sustain families' trust in the initiative. Thus, they suggested it is critical to communicate transparently and frequently. One FSM shared, one of them shared, be honest with the process of the conversation because families may think we did it today. Next week, we're going to come back, help them understand the process, include them on the process if you can. This illustrates that while families might be disappointed in the length of time between the data collection and the response from the system, or the next time the FSMs will come back to hold a conversation, helping to keep them in the loop, validating and valuing their concerns, and teaching them about the process is important. The goal should not be to take from them, but to create with them. So even if they can't be the ones directly involved in some aspects, they can have input and be kept abreast of decisions and next steps. In terms of managing partners' expectations, one FSM shared, don't allow anybody to try to push you into getting the response or reaction or what they want to hear, because you need to tell partners up front, this is not going to be what you want to hear all the time. This highlights the challenges of the broker role and the likely pressures community members may face. And they identify the importance of recognizing the need to push back when appropriate, set limits, and manage expectations on both sides of the table. So we were really excited to share our findings with you about Favor's work and their successful process. We will now reflect on some of the implications or takeaways of our findings and what we think can be helpful recommendations for other community academic partnerships hoping to achieve similar goals of sustainability and independence. First is the importance of having intentionality about building capacity and sustainability. This isn't something that should happen as an afterthought in a community partnership. This can look like discussions that are had before a partnership is even formed, naming the intentionality of passing ownership fully to the community before the partnership ends. And at this point, roles of each partner can be defined. The partnership should also collaboratively develop a plan and document it that describes how skills development can be scaffolded. For example, like the chart that Dr. Kaufman shared, which showed that the group increasingly took over more complicated tasks with less supervision from the academic partner. And then lastly, there should be a constant feedback loop throughout the life of the partnership to be checking that progress is being made toward the ultimate goal. And if not, a plan should be made to assess what are the needs of the of the membership and how we can get back on track. Our next key point is the importance of centering community voice and ownership in the CBPR process. This can look like making sure that community voice, knowledge, and expertise is solicited and infused throughout all stages of the initiative, from development to implementation and evaluation. Through this process, community members can be empowered to transition from learners in the partnership to leaders. And as these capacities grow, decisions about what happens in the partnership should more fully and then completely lie with community members, such that by the end of the partnership, the academic partners will need to have little or no control of the leadership or leadership. And lastly, is the idea that community-driven initiatives are not just a tool for the community, but can be leveraged to duly impact systems. While not all partnerships have this goal in mind, we do have recommendations for approaching this type of undertaking. So first, at inception, tools can be built in with intentionality to support the group's capacity to maintain aspects of the initiative once other supports are withdrawn. For example, will the group need funding to continue this initiative? Or is there a way the group can shift responsibility within the organization's regular operation to be able to support the initiative? Partners can also be coached to anticipate situations that they may need to navigate as they act as a broker between a system and their community. For example, making sure that the goals and benefits don't change without input from the community, and how to advocate for the initiative while maintaining relationships with system actors. And lastly, while the goal of ownership is to elevate the knowledge, capacities, and strengths of the community members, academic partners also hold privileged information that they should be sure to share, pass on, and leave with the communities. This can be in the form of developing trainings like webinars, manuals, guides, or connecting the group with resources and channels that they might not otherwise be aware of. These steps taken together can work to set a strong foundation for continued success and the growth of a community driven initiative. So thank you. That is all from us. We're happy to take any questions you might have. And you can also find our paper in the American Journal of Community Psychology.
Isha, I was asked during the presentation if it was possible for you to provide me with the slides so that I could give them to everyone.
Sure, we're happy to do that.
Great. Thank you.
Um, I was also wondering, should we leave the slides up while we're doing the Q&A?
No, let's take them down. That's great.
Okay, sure. Give me 1 second. And then are we calling on people?
Yes, I'm just watching the chat to see if anybody's putting in any questions, or if anybody has a question, please feel free, unmute yourself and ask. Yes, Jamie, ask your question.
Oh, wonderful. Nice to meet you both. Thank you for your presentation. I'm from McMaster University. Yeah, I love the framework. Is the use of the framework public? If I were to take a lot of what you guys laid out as in resources and applied that to a grant that I was writing or like a community partnership that I'm working on, I just wanted to clarify if those resources are usable.
So we published another paper that lays out the training plan. It was for another project. I've done this process in multiple projects, but it's also in the American Journal of Community Psychology, and I'm the lead author on it. So if you Google Scholar Me, that paper should come up.
Awesome. Thank you.
Danica,
Hi, you too. Sorry, I was just making sure I was unmuted. My name is Danica Evering. I am a research data management specialist actually here at McMaster. And I was interested in what you were talking about in terms of the kind of transition of data stewardship from the group towards favor. And so I'm wondering if you can just share a little bit more about the importance of that and if you've done any other kind of real like data sharing more publicly or anything like that. My colleague Sabanya and I are working on a kind of like data management planning and open data framework for working with communities. So I'd be really interested to hear if you have anything or any experience with that.
Sure. In the first year, actually in the first 4 years, that favor was involved while I was still working with them. Initially, my team managed the Excel files. We've developed an Excel file that allows easy sorting of data and looking at the different codes and things like that. So we transferred that Excel spreadsheet over to favor. And my data manager spent a year working with them, training them how to do it, how to put the data in, and to really make sure they were comfortable doing it. In those first 4 years, when the report was put on the Connecticut website to be shared more broadly with the community. So one thing Favor did was they went back to every single group where they held a community conversation and brought them back the summary and then heard from them to make sure it resonated with them. We also posted the summary, the questions that were asked, and actually the coded data was put up on a website so that people would have access to it. So it was in a PDF format, so not easily sorted, but folks were able to see the data sorted by code. And we never got any feedback about that. I'm sure people didn't want to go into hundreds of pages of data, but we felt it was important that the raw data be out there as well.
Keisha, we can't hear you. You're muted.
I know. I was reading through the chat and I was saying that we have a question
Yes,
about
we got
funding.
two. Yeah.
So, when someone asked, how can community collaborations such as this one manage issues such as funding or lack thereof? Because I found that a lot of initiatives get cut short due to lack of funding. So I know this project had a grant. So Joy, I don't know if you want to.
Yeah. So this project did have a grant. Actually, we've continued. We've just gotten our fourth grant in the series. The favor staff are all funded by the state. And so their full-time jobs and salaries are provided by the state so that they can do their work in empowering families and advocating for families. My team was funded by the grant. And so initially we had a 4-year grant, we had a play grant and then a 4-year. And my goal and the goal of the state was that this work would continue post that grant. We didn't know we'd be fortunate to get 2 more grants after that, but we have been. But Favor has continued to do this work independently and even figured out how to do it during the pandemic, where they held community conversations remotely. The issue of paying folks, so the folks who participated in the focus groups or in the community conversations did not get paid. They were just mostly support groups that were coming together and inviting the favor staff in. And another initiative I have, I'm working with adult consumers of behavioral health services, and they've been doing focus groups at a publicly funded mental health center for 12 years now. And in that, I beg, borrow, and steal. So I don't get compensated for my part of doing that work at all. I pay we call them consumer researchers. They are paid for everything they do. And we have a $10 stipend that we hand cash to folks who participate in the focus groups. So that is, I just figure it out through my other grants and contracts because the work is so important, but it is underfunded work and important work. So hopefully all of our funders will hear that and start providing more dollars.
And
I would also say, sorry.
go ahead, because I was just going to say the other question, but please.
Yeah, and just to echo, I just want to say that that is definitely one of the big challenges, and that's why we thought about the importance of what Faber was able to achieve, because many of the reasons why these initiatives tend to fail is that once the grant money or anything dissolves, it's really difficult to maintain that. We don't want to put burdens on people. But I think what's really interesting is that there is the system level work that's being done, right? So then when systems start to see that this can contribute meaningfully to their ability to be more effective, that might also be another channel where they can get more motivation from them to invest in these projects. So that might be another aspect to take. Another way of gaining support is to say that this will also benefit you at a higher level as well, the system. So that's maybe an idea for other partnerships thinking of doing something like this.
We have a question from Rebecca. What's the best way to make first contact with a new community?
I'm further along in my career probably than many of you. So when I was first getting started in my career, I would approach communities that I was interested in working with. I'd show up a lot. I'd go to their meetings. I'd talk to folks and I'd offer to do training. I'd ask them what they were interested in. Clinical community psychologists, I would bring to them trainings that I could do to help them or anything that they would like, and started there. So you do a lot of pro bono work to build that initial relationship. But then the favor staff and I are in the process of writing a grant now that will sustain the work and actually look at it more extensively. But that's multiple years of building that up. But those first steps, it's really about getting out there, talking with folks, and then seeing how you can help them before you ask them to help you.
Sorry.
Distillery. Thank you.
Sorry.
Thanks so much for your presentation. I just actually had a question, and you've already alluded to this a little bit in terms of doing some things pro bono and some of the challenges as a community-based researcher in terms of maybe the lack of synergy that sometimes exists between community priorities and expectations of researchers within academies. And so I guess my question is, how have you navigated sometimes those differences, especially in a context where as a community-based researcher, you're giving up that control and that leadership, and there's this focus on co-creation and doing things together with your partners. Sometimes at an academic level, there's expectations on researchers to publish a certain amount of papers, to have a certain amount of funding. And yeah, I guess twofold. How have you navigated those challenges if you've experienced those? And secondly, what do you feel is needed on the academic side or by academic institutions? What changes are needed to better support community-based researchers?
So I'll start, and Keisha, please add in. So Keisha and I are at different ends of the spectrum of our careers. She's in her second year as an assistant professor, and I don't know, I've been at Yale, I think 30 years now. My clock to tenure and full professor was slower than it would have been otherwise because I valued this type of work. So it took me a bit longer. and I'm in an academic medical setting, we can keep extending our appointments. And so it's not, you have so many years to get to associate. So that helps some. I think it also helps that I'm part of a group. I work at the Yale Consultation Center, and we have 9 faculty there, and all of us do community engaged work. So as a collective voice, we're able to bring that to our department and share why it may take us longer to get the number of hubs that were needed. But we're also able to share the value of our work. And because of that, there have actually been changes at our institution. That community is now the 4th pillar of the Department of Psychiatry, along with research and training and clinical work. So we just done that this year, that we now have community as a 4th pillar. And there's starting to be internal funding available for junior folks to engage in this work. We have a whole center that's based on this work, and they do have funding that's available. So I think talking with folks in leadership and for the academy itself to really, if this is a value that they have to engage in this work, then they need to put the dollars up to support it, because that's needed. And the community members who are engaging as co-researchers need to be compensated. Yeah, I will never sit at a table with folks that we're all doing the same work and they're not getting compensated and I am. That's something I push for. And like I said, I figured it out by reducing my effort on these grants, on this, any cost center related to this, and increasing it on larger grants so that I have dollars available to pay people. But it's really just playing and moving a lot of cups around on the table to figure out how to support it. But I think for the Yale Department of Psychiatry at this point, we've done the work that this is seen as an important part of it. And our folks are actually being promoted on a more expedited basis, even if the number of pubs they have is more limited.
And then I would say, yes, I think it's very kind of department culture dependent, but even broader for just where we're moving in terms of research. I 100% agree with what Joyce said about having support. Doing the work on your own is extremely time consuming. And you think about, I may have gotten one, again, the paper published, because unfortunately, talking the currency of publications when you're in these academic roles, whereas my colleague got 4 papers out this year, right? Because I'm doing interviews and I'm doing XYZ and I'm sitting down and talking to people. So I think being at a place where they do see the value in that work is really important. So where I'm at, they're starting to even put into our annual reviews, how have you done community facing scholarship? And people are struggling around that. People who maybe have never incorporated that into their work are like, I don't know what to say. I gave a talk somewhere, but just noticing that different places are starting to pay attention to it more. And even I'm seeing even grant solicitation, depending on who's in leadership, right? As administration changes, that director's values can be reflected. For example, I look into the NIJ, which is the National Institutes of Justice, over here, and the current director, every single solicitation she sends out, you have to show that there is some type of community engaged research, right? And we're moving toward that. And I'm not going to say that the majority of funding streams or the majority of places are going to know how to support that or be interested in that. But I think that can also show you where you should be thinking of landing or who you want to work with and collaborate with. So if you have a number of individuals who can help you support that, I think that can still be a really important part of your scholarship. But definitely recognizing that especially for being junior and in a place that doesn't give you funding or resources to be able to do this type of work, it can be really challenging.
Thanks so much.
We have a comment from Jamie in the chat. We've seen some regional grant structures require community-based research partnerships. A follow-up to Joy's point on funding equity, could you elaborate on how you structured funding toward community organizations that partnered in the research?
So I'll start. So the grant that Favor and I are writing right now, we sat and we figured out the effort that's needed from all players that will participate. And then they developed their budget and I developed the budget for my team. unfortunately, they're not able to pay their staff the level that we get at an academic institution. And I compensate in other ways by bringing food or other things to the meeting, which I know they can't provide, but they're able to say upfront what effort they think will be needed. And we also made sure to build in administrative funding, so support for the administrator and their fiscal administrator to make sure that the project will not be a burden on their organization. And so it's part of the conversation. So we're partnering in the grant writing. And if you're able to do that, you can build it into the budget. If you're not able to do that initially and you get the dollars and then work with the agency, I think part of it may be the agencies you're thinking about partnering with, having a discussion with them on how much money they'll need and making sure you set those dollars aside in your budget to enable that to happen.
If we have no other questions, then I'd like to thank everyone for joining us. Sorry, I was muted. Yes. Well, I was going to say, since we don't have any other, oh, wait a minute. There's something in the chat again from Rachel. Really great work. Thank you for sharing. There's a lot of guidance available about building meaningful relationships and strengthening capacity, but we do not always have applied story of how we implemented it that documents the important facilitators shared today. Thanks again. That's great. Thank you for saying. So I'd like to thank I'm still muted, aren't I? Yeah. Geez. Okay. There we go. I want to thank everyone for joining us today, and especially Keisha and Joy for giving this wonderful talk to us today. There is a 1-minute survey that I put in the chat there if you'd like to fill it out to give us feedback. And again, thank you all, and thank you, Joy, and thank you, Keisha. Greatly appreciated.
Thank you all for having us. See you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.